I'd like to welcome everyone and thank you for joining us for our Industry Insiders webinar series, which is a part of our webinar series through the Office of Alumni Engagement. My name is Pam Persichetti and I am the Alumni Engagement Officer. So again, thanks for joining us and taking some time out of your day to tune in. I will jump right into introducing our speaker. We're excited to have with us Jeff Bonaldi. He is a graduate of 2000. Jeff graduated with a bachelor's degree in political science, and upon graduating, he then went into business for himself by patenting one of his late father's inventions. And after a few years running that company, he transitioned into the world of finance and spent 15 years on Wall Street. Then Jeff started his company, his own small business, which is the Explorer's Passage, a global travel adventure company, which he is now the CEO of. Jeff lives in Princeton currently and also recently started a consulting practice for small businesses to advise them. Jeff is going to give some more detail about his background in this presentation. So without further ado, I will turn it over to him. Jeff, thanks for being with us. We appreciate you taking time to give us your insights and advice. We're looking forward to it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Pam. Thank you for everyone for joining today. Thank you to the College of New Jersey for hosting these great sessions. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. So today, I'm going to focus on how to turn your passion into your profession. And we're going to begin with my story. I'm going to go way back in time. When I think of, well, first off, I grew up in northern New Jersey in Bergen County in a small town called New Milford. And when I think back to who I was when I was very young, there were two things that really come to mind. And the first is that I loved adventure. So you could always find me playing in the snow, playing in the dirt somewhere. You could see me here in preschool going across my first suspension bridge. I loved the ocean. I couldn't get enough of adventure. And the other, one second. Yeah, the other aspect of me, the attribute of me when I was young was that I was a huge dreamer. So I would create these fantastical dreams in my mind of me being an explorer, looking for lost treasure around the world, discovering the ancient city of Atlantis. And I dreamed of having this big life where I could use my life and my talents to help the world. Unfortunately, as I got more into my teenage years, this adventure side of me and this dreamer side of me began to go away. And it was really basically a few kind of, I would say, traumatic personal events that caused this, where I became much more realistic about life. And the final, I would say, I kind of nail in the coffin on this was what happened on July 10th, 1996. I woke up, I heard a knock on the door. It was my uncle, and he looked at me and he said, "Jeffrey, your father has passed away." And at the time, I was confused. I was in shock. I didn't know, what he meant by this. My father wasn't sick or anything. And I asked him what happened, and he said that he committed suicide. I walked downstairs in my house, and there must have been 100 people within the house and downstairs and outside, and it was just chaos. My father, everybody was crying and upset. And my father, was a successful entrepreneur in our town. He was basically the pseudo mayor. He knew everyone. And at that point, for me, I kind of pushed it away. I didn't really deal with it at the time, but I started working the rest of the summer, and about a month and a half later, I became a freshman at the College of New Jersey. And the College of New Jersey for me was exactly what I needed in that point in my life. And I threw myself into every aspect of it, and it really opened up my entire world. When I was growing up, while I was this dreamer, I never really traveled much outside New Jersey, never traveled outside the country. and TC&J opened me up to what was possible. So within a few weeks, I became class president. I got very interested in politics and how to serve others. I became a political science major. I joined this amazing fraternity. It doesn't exist now at TC&J, but it did. And it was called Theta Chi. And many of those friends that I met during those days are still some of my closest friends to this day. And we have a dinner every December where 50 of us still meet. I was on the varsity tennis team as well. So it gave me kind of a view in the world. It brought me connection. It brought me, I would say, safety and security. And I credit it with the foundation for so much that has happened within my life. When I was a senior in college, it wasn't very clear to me of what I wanted to do for a job. A lot of my friends were doing internships, or they were teachers that were they were having, their jobs were going to start in a few months. But for me, I was confused. I didn't know. And there was this sense, though, I wanted to find something that I loved. I wanted to find some purpose or passion. And in senior year, I started a company called Sports Clip. And the Sports Clip was a series of small pouches and wallets that had a clip to it, where if you went running or if you went to the beach, you could attach it to your waist buckle. The interesting thing is, though, this was actually my father's invention, and the patent for it came in the day after he passed away. So I felt when I was a senior that I wanted to try to finish it off for him. It gave me something to focus on, something to be passionate about, and something to kind of close out in my life. So all of senior year, I worked on building the company, and we launched the company at a big trade show at the Jacob Javits Convention Center in New York City. We had this amazing booth. We had one of the busiest booths in the show, and 4 of my friends from TC&J helped me man the booth. And from that experience, all these amazing things started happening. I met an entity who were asked to take my product on to help fund the expansion of it. I got an office in New York City. We started making the products all around the country. Making the products overseas and started distributing around the country. And I thought it was going to actually be this huge success. But over the next few years, I hit a lot of walls. And, I was still relatively young. I was, 23, 24, but I wasn't meeting my numbers with the entity who was funding me. I couldn't see really a path forward. And at the age of 24, I essentially realized that it was time to close this up and to change direction. I took it very hard. I thought I was doing something for kind of the right reasons, something that, I thought I was passionate about. And I remember at that point, I said to myself, I will never start a business again. And I will never do something that I'm passionate about again. And I was very stern on that. And I said, my life will shift to practicality again and to making money. So I started taking classes at Wharton at the University of Pennsylvania on business. I was teaching tennis in Princeton, and I was waitering tables at Chili's on Route 1 in Princeton, for anyone who remembers that. And at around 25 and a half years old, I got an opportunity to work at Merrill Lynch Investment Managers, which was on Scudder's Mill Road in Plainsboro. And it was a great opportunity for me. And I spent the first year in marketing, and then I moved into a junior investment portfolio management role. And just like how I felt TC&J was exactly what I needed at that point in time, Merrill Lynch for me, and being in the financial industry, was the same for me. It brought me a lot of structure. I learned a lot. I worked with a lot of incredible people. And overall, I spent 15 years in the banking industry. First as a portfolio manager, and then I moved into a sales and marketing role within Citigroup's investment bank in New York City. And again, if from an outside perspective, I had the perfect job, an amazing, amazing manager, smart people, and I was very well compensated, but I wasn't, as I was learning a lot and I knew how thankful I was for all this. There was a part of me that knew that I was not in the right place for me. And it kind of came to a head in about 9-10 years ago. So I'm 42 right now. But when I was 33, I was going through a lot of challenges in my personal life. I was going through a divorce. Obviously I felt very disconnected from my work. And I felt like I had worked so hard at all of these things, personally and professionally, but I had gone in the wrong direction. And as things were kind of collapsing and I felt like I was on the bottom, I said that I'm going to rebuild now in a direction that's much more closely to my heart. So, it's funny looking back, I knew I needed structure at one point, but now it was very, very clear that I needed to really focus on what I was passionate about. And I had the tools at that point. And again, at 33 years old, again, 9 years ago, for anyone who knows me now and what I do, which you're going to see in a few minutes, you're going to think this is absolutely crazy. But I went on the first hike of my life at a place called Bear Mountain. And you can see a picture of Bear Mountain right here. Bear Mountain is 45 minutes north of New York City. And a few friends invited me to hike that day. I don't know why I had never gone on a hike before, but I'm glad I did that day. And the experience completely transformed my life. There were 3 aspects of it. The first was my connection with nature. I felt such an affinity to being in the woods on that trail that day. I felt it was very healing, the healing power of nature. Separately was the community. So there was a group of 3 of us who were hiking up that mountain that day, and I felt very supported. And for me, who I was going through a lot of personal stuff, having that support and that community around me as we hiked just made me feel better. And then lastly, you can see the summit of the mountain on the right there, and it's only 500 feet in elevation, but for me, by reaching that summit, I felt an incredible level of achievement and validation, and it helped me start to rebuild my confidence. So I got home that day, and I knew I had found something that I deeply resonated with, and I started to go on adventures all over the East Coast, then all over the world. And it started as climbing, it went to horseback riding, I became a certified diver, I dove with great white sharks, and I couldn't get enough of adventure, and it was transforming my life. It was helping me reconnect to that dreamer that I was when I was a little boy, that I had lost over the years through some of these tragedies that happened when I was growing up. And I just kept following that feeling. Now, at the time, I was still working in banking. I needed to keep my day job for obvious practicality reasons and money, but I started to make adventure such a big part of my life that I knew that I wanted to actually start a company that revolved around it. And I wanted to provide these experiences, these potential for transformation for other people who might be going through some similar things in their lives. And the company, I started working on it in 2012. We launched also at the Jacob Javits Convention Center in 2014. So the same venue that we launched my first company at 14 years before. And the focus was on 3 things. The focus was on history, adventure, and travel, and really on storytelling. I really wanted to have the company be an embodiment of everything that I loved. And I trusted that if I followed that, it would just take me to where I was supposed to go. So we launched in 2014 at the Jacob Javits Convention Center. We won Best Small Booth in the show at a 450 booths. And I knew I was onto something with this. And over the last 7 years, we've become one of the most dynamic travel companies in the world. We are featured in some of the major publications on Earth, such as National Geographic, BBC Earth, and the Washington Post. We've had reporters who actually come on our trips. People from over 50 countries have been on our trips, and we operate on every continent and in the Arctic region. And the company has even evolved further to not just assist people in kind of going through on travel, going through what these hardships are going through, but also working with leading conservationists such as Robert Swan and Jane Goodall, and governmental leaders like the Icelandic environmental minister to use adventure as a way to solve global social issues. So I was able to use the company as a way to reconnect with my love of political science from back in TCNJ. Eventually, I left banking, which was 3 years ago, and I've been running my company now full time. And I put some pictures here of some of the amazing experiences that we've had the opportunity to take clients on. In the upper left-hand corner, it's a group who just reached Machu Picchu, which is this ancient treasure in Peru. You can see another group at the start of the Inca Trail in Peru. On the upper right-hand side is a group of 100 people that we took to Antarctica 2 years ago. On the lower left, I started a tour at Bear Mountain. It was just kind of more of a personal thing, but to really explore the history. But it's a place that, you know, for me, got this all started, and I wanted people to experience that as well. In the middle on the bottom is a group we had in Costa Rica on a rafting trip, and on the lower right-hand side is a group of 20 climbers who all successfully summited Mount Kilimanjaro last year, which was 20 out of 20, which was a great success for everyone. You know, through these adventure experiences, I started to notice huge transformations in all of our clients, our team members who were coming on the trips. And I saw how, I saw how adventure had changed me, but I saw how adventure was changing them. And it started to make them think that maybe there was something more for them in life, more than whatever they were doing at the time, whether they were in school or whether they were looking to start a company or whether they were looking for a new job. Adventure was a way to help them question it. And I began working on an individual basis with a lot of these people and helping them transition to something new, and really focused around starting projects or starting companies. And a lot of these people had a few things in common. A lot of people feel stuck in life. They feel like in a rut, like every day feels like the same. They're not moving forward and they can't figure out why. There's a lot of people also who feel unfulfilled in their work. They might, again, have a great job like I did from an outside perspective, but they're not getting that deep sense of fulfillment, which we all need emotionally. And then lastly, purpose. So you see a lot of people who have their day job for money, but they volunteer or they participate in charity events because they need some purpose in their life. I started working with a lot of people in going through my story and the steps that I took to get to this new place in life. And I truly believe that everyone can create their way forward. When I was in banking, I remember when I was unfulfilled at first, I was like, well, I need to find another job at another bank or another role in my bank. And I must have sent hundreds of resumes out and no one responded, which was very strange because I had a very good background. And at one point it hit me that maybe the answer is for me to create my life. Because if I look back, if I got another job, it would have been the same thing all over again, right? So I made this decision for myself, is to create exactly the life that I wanted to for myself. I have this conversation with all of my clients and all of my friends. They're like, how did you do it? Where do you begin? I don't know where to start. Everyone feels overwhelmed about the possibility of starting their own company, or starting a project, right? And I like to tell people is to really break it down into a series of small steps. I could have never predicted in a million years that all of the things that have happened would have happened the way they did. But what I did do is I started to create a foundation for my company, and then I just went step by step. And I never looked too far ahead. And I just trusted that what felt right, it would come into fruition. So today we're going to focus on the 8 steps in starting a new business. So for anyone who's looking to, again, who has thought about this and looking to make that change in life, I want to really go over some of the foundational things that have been helpful for me, but that have been helpful also for the people that we're working with. In the chat room, you'll see that I sent 2 articles to everyone that you can look at after our call. The first is an article by Entrepreneur Magazine. They did a profile of me 2 years ago that shows that really shows my story really well. How it took me from growing up to banking to starting my own business. And the second one is a very detailed article based on these 8 essential steps. So it'll provide further clarification on how to do each one. So let's start with the first one. Define your product or service. Okay, so I had talked to a lot of people that are like, well, I want to start my own business, but I don't know where to begin. And I say, well, what do you love? And they say, I have no idea. Well, I get a couple comments. I have no idea what I love, or I love too many things, and I can't choose one. Those are really the common responses. And what I say is to really think about these 3 questions. The first is, what are you good at? The second, what do you love? And the third, what gives you a sense of fulfillment? And the commonality between all 3 of these will help you figure out what you're supposed to be doing for your new business. And let's focus on the first one. So for what are you good at? So when I was thinking about starting my adventure company, I reflected on what am I good at? And I knew I was good at 2 things. I was very good at managing risk. And secondly, I was very good at forming groups of people in groups, right? So let's talk about the managing risk. So I was a portfolio manager where we manage risk. In starting a business, you need to manage risk, but also as an owner of an adventure travel company, you are taking people in situations that involve a lot of risk. So you can see how that led into what I'm doing now. Separately, in terms of bringing people together, ever since college, at freshman year at TCNJ, we started the first the freshman formal. We were looking for more things to do on campus. So me and the vice president at the time of our freshman class, we started that experience. We had 100 people attend the freshman formal. And I've always been like that, whether it's inviting people over my house or showing people the places that I love. It's always been something that I've just been very good at. It comes very natural to me. Separately, what do you love? I love, this is something I thought about, and I love adventure. I love history, and I love storytelling. So I knew I wanted to incorporate those 3 things into my company. And then thirdly, what gives you a sense of fulfillment? For me, it's really around helping people see how powerful they are, helping people see how extraordinary they are. So I wanted to make sure on our trips, we were providing experiences that gave people the opportunity for that. So this is obviously a process that you have to individually reflect on, but it's a very good starting point as you start thinking about what you want to do for your new business. The second essential step in starting a new business is to join a trade association. So you have your idea for your business, but you have no idea where to go next. And what I did is I joined an entity called the Adventure Travel Trade Association, and it's the governing body of the global adventure industry. And the people who are members are media, lawyers, other business owners. A lot of these associations have a lot of educational resources, consultants to help you start your businesses. And every major industry around the world has either one or multiple trade associations. Again, when I joined this, the first thing I needed to do was to figure out how to get people to work with me, how to get people guides to run my trips. And through this organization, I was connected with guides in Nepal and guides in Africa and guides in South America who I ended up working with, and I still work with today, who helped me run my trips. So again, as you're starting on that process, if you don't know where to begin, a trade association could be a very helpful next step. The third essential step in starting a new business is to choose the name of your company. What I like to tell people is to think about something that embodies your brand, reflect on what you're trying to sell, and get feedback. I'm very big on feedback in all aspects of the business creation process. You know, you're so close to the process, a lot of times there's things that you won't be able to see. As I was thinking about what to name my company, you know, at the time I was very enthralled with exploration. So I knew I wanted the word explorer in some way to be part of the company, because people were really going on explorations around the world with us. The second thing I was very interested in was helping people pass that impossible limit in their life. And there is an ancient trade route called the Northwest Passage, which is in Canada, which for hundreds of years was seen as impassable by explorers. And about 150 years ago, a British explorer found a path through it. And in history, it's seen as, again, as impassable, but it shows what's possible if you keep trying. And that's why I included the word passage. So it had a lot of meaning for me, and I was able to incorporate it into the name of our company. And I took that name and I sent it to dozens and dozens of my friends, and to get feedback on how we could get to this place. So you know, don't be afraid of criticism or suggestions, and be very open when you're speaking to people. Secondly, once you decide on your name, there's a few things you want to think about. It might be very prudent to trademark your name, or to check if someone else has trademarked it already, because as an example, there was a company called Gap Adventures, GAP, who they're now called G Adventures. And the reason they're called G Adventures is because as they started to grow, the clothing store Gap actually sued them. So they actually had the lawsuit. It was a strange lawsuit, right? Because clothing is very different than travel, but Gap was such a powerful company that the adventure company ended up saying they didn't want to fight the lawsuit, and they had to remarket everything. So I tell people that if you come up with a name, it's a good idea to work with a lawyer to do a trademark search, and if it's available, to trademark it so you don't have to worry about future issues. Separately, it's free, so secure all the major social media accounts with that name, such as Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And then lastly, purchase the website domains. So a lot of people love to get the .com, but sometimes the .com isn't available, and it could cost thousands of dollars to purchase it. You don't need to pay that money. You know, there are other options like .net or .biz. But these are three critical things. Once you come up with the name, I always suggest to follow this process to get that, to secure these things and get them out of the way. The fourth step is to create a legal business entity. I can't emphasize enough on how important this is. What I see a lot of people do is they come up with their business. They even start selling their products, but they actually have not even formed a legal business entity. So all of their expenses that they had occurred for a year or two, and their revenue is going through their personal accounts. And this is an issue for a number of reasons, but mostly there's a good chance that you're not going to have sales for the first few years, that you're just going to be spending money and taking on expenses. If you start a legal entity and have all of your expenses and all those expenses are attributed to that legal entity, then you're able to get a tax write-off for those expenses. To give you some idea, it took me 2 years. So 2012 to 2014, we launched, it took me to build the company. I incurred tens of thousands of dollars of expenses to get everything ready. And then I launched the company in 2014, but we struggled with sales at first. It's very hard to break into a crowded market. So it took me a year and a half after that to get my first sale. So in total, it took us 3.5 years of work to get our first sale, incurring an enormous amount of expenses that we were able to amortize and still get some credit on to these days from a tax perspective. So something very important to think about. It can be very helpful to get legal and accounting advice as you start your legal business entity, especially around liability. We are an S corporation, my company, and it does provide a level of liability protection from us in case there was a lawsuit or whatnot. And you want to have some separation between your personal life and your business to protect you in case of any future lawsuits or liability. Just a helpful tip that I mentioned here on the bottom is it's a good idea not to name your corporation the same as your product. You might not realize this, but a lot of the famous products that you see out today, it's not necessarily the name of the legal name of their corporation. So for me, our corporation is JMB Enterprises, which is my initials. But the doing business as, it's called a DBA, is the Explorer's Passage. And the reason that a lot of people recommend this is because you might end up changing the name of your product, or you might expand to multiple trademarks that you want to keep under the same business entity. So what you could do is you could have a generic name that maybe is associated with you as your legal name, but you could have multiple DBAs and multiple product names that are all attributed to that business entity. The fifth essential step is to open the business bank account. And this really ties closely into number 4 about creating a legal entity. And you do need to create a legal entity before opening a business bank account. And for some of the same reasons as what we just spoke about, by having a bank account, you could infuse it with cash and capital, and you could be paying expenses and receiving revenue into that bank account. It creates a segregation between your personal business and business life, and it also will help you. It'll help you keep track of any potential tax payments and whatnot. And just keeping your records very clean and straight from the start is a very good idea. So number 6, get legal advice. When I joined the ATTA, the Adventure Travel Trade Association, my first step was I found a lawyer who was a member of the Adventure Travel Trade Association that lived in Connecticut. And I messaged him and I said, I work in banking and I want to start an adventure travel company, but I know nothing about the industry. And he said, well, why don't we meet at Starbucks in New York City one day? So we met, and he was an invaluable resource for me over the next 2 years in helping me build my business. I'm a big proponent of finding a lawyer who works in the industry that you're going to be doing business in. So there's a lot of people, when they hire a lawyer for their new business, they go with a family friend or they go with someone who they're familiar with. But when you hire someone who has contacts and experience in that industry, they just look at things very differently. I've worked with Jeff, who's the lawyer for over 10 years now. He's introduced me to potential tour partners, helped me get into travel masterminds, helped me also set up all of my my documents around liability and risk. As you can imagine, by doing what we do, we are exposed to a lot of risk. Taking people on ships, taking people up mountains, what documents, liability waivers do we need to put into place to protect ourselves? And one other thing, if you focus on a lawyer who's in the industry, as things change and evolve in the industry, they are probably up to speed on that. So in a time like now with COVID, we're redoing a lot of our documents because we're worried about what happens if someone gets sick while on our trip. And what liability do we have on that? And there's a lot of travel lawyers who are coming together around this to think about it and to help their clients about it. So if you were with again, a family general practice lawyer, they're not going to have that information. Step 7 is to create your logo. And this is probably the most exciting step. And, you know, you got to trust me on this one. But I've seen with me and with the people that I work with, it provides an enormous momentum for them in their journey once they see their final logo. It's, you know, the logo clarifies your vision of your business to the world. It shows the world you're real, right? All this hard work that you've put into building this business, you're a real entity, and you're ready to sell. So, you know, spend some time on this one. Find someone to help you with a logo that you're passionate about. You know, you don't need to spend tens of thousands of dollars working with a marketing company on this. There are a number of resources online where you can get a logo made for under $100, sometimes even under $50. There's two that I like a lot. One is 99 Designs, which is this great resource where there's different levels. There's a $99 level, but there's also a $300 level where you have designers from all over the world showing you multiple potential logo designs, and you get to choose one through a competition. The second one is Upwork, which is a freelancing site, which I've been using for 10 years now, where you can find graphic designers, video editors, even lawyers to help you with any of your needs. And you can also get a great logo made from there as well. Again, there's something about the logo that gets people really excited and gets them energized for their next step. So enjoy that process. So the 8th and final step in starting a new business is getting your product or service ready for market. So again, you have the idea, you've created the foundation for your company, but you actually have to create your product or service now. And one of the biggest mistakes that I've made and that I see a lot of people make is that they think they need to have more than enough. They need to have as many services as an established company has to start their business. An example for me was when we started the business, we started with 3 adventure tours, which was pretty limited. But one of the consultants I was working with at the time told me that I should have started with 1. And in retrospect, if I had to restart the company, I would have only started with 1 tour that was very focused and put all my energy into that 1 tour. And let me explain that further. So I have a friend who's starting a handbag company, and she sees Chanel where they have, you know, dozens and dozens of handbags. So she thinks that she has to launch her company with dozens of handbags. And it's not the route to success. She's going to spread herself too thin. It's going to be hard for her to put all of the energy and to find the time to make all that successful. It's really smart to find 1 or 2 products, is to launch with 1 or 2 products, be extremely focused, deliver flawlessly. You know, on our first tour, it was a trip of people on the Inca Trail to Machu Picchu. And my job was to make it the greatest tour possible, to deliver exceptional customer service before, during, and after. So we had great reviews to TripAdvisor from which to build from. And that's really the approach that I think everybody needs. Don't think you need to compete with a company that's been around for 50, 60 years, because most likely they started extremely small with 1 or 2 products. Last kind of helpful tip around all of the things that I had mentioned is really limit your expenses. It's going to take a few years for you to get some revenue into your business. There are so many business owners that I speak to where they think that the moment they launch their business that the sales are going to flood in. I've never seen it work that way. For me, again, it took us a few years to get revenue in the door. And it's just something about the passage of time for you to keep learning and being in the industry. So as you're thinking about your business plan and you know, looking at your expenses and your revenue, assume that no revenue is going to happen for 2 to 3 years. And keep your expenses very low. And there's a lot of ways to be, again, crafty and do that, whether it's creating your logo there's website solutions out there that are very low cost that you can get done seeking help from friends or family. So just be very careful of that, because a lot of companies, they start spending so much out of the gate that after a year or two, they've run out of cash and they have to close up their business. So the next step in starting your business is really showing the world your product or service. We're not going to go into depth on that today, but what I will say is if you build a strong foundation based on the 8 principles that I spoke about previously, it'll set you up for strong success going forward. And if you have the will and you put the hard work in, you're going to make it a success. So now we're going to open it up to see if we have any questions.
All right, Jeff, thank you so much. That was great. Really informative and really actionable steps. So I think everyone can really take away from this and with things that they can move forward with right away. So thank you, of course, for sharing with us. And we do have a question. The burning question right now everyone's asking. How has COVID been affecting your business?
Yeah, so that's a good question. It's been interesting, right? So it's obviously having a big effect on my business and everyone in the travel industry. We've had hundreds of people who were supposed to be traveling this year that we've had to move out to dates starting in 2021. So in my view, at least in the adventure travel space, I'm not positive that there's going to be travel for the rest of the year. And then we also do some ship-based cruises. We've moved those to the end of 2021. So obviously, I had a choice when COVID started. At first, I thought to myself, I'm like, well, I didn't expect this. This is extremely challenging. But I took an approach that I take an approach now in my life that everything's happening for me and not against me. So what can I learn from this and how can I get better? And a lot of positive things have actually happened from it. Number one, I started getting involved in a few travel mastermind groups that I wasn't previously involved with. So basically, I'm in 2 groups every week with me and I would say 8 other CEOs from adventure travel industries, where we're being very open about what we're going through. We're being very collaborative, and even on everything, like from marketing to operations and whatnot. And it's making me look at my business in ways that I had not seen. And it's actually helping me to position for a higher level of growth that I couldn't see before as well. So if COVID did not happen, all of us would have not reached out to each other for that level of support. So I'm thankful, I'm thankful for that. And I'm spending a lot of time kind of redoing, obviously, like all of our procedures and our liability waivers, but really rethinking of our marketing as well. A second thing that it has taught me is that while our sales were going really well before COVID, is a lot of the sales were coming in through the marketing channels, like from word of mouth, from past guests, or for friends or for people who have seen me speak in different live venues. And I had not done certain marketing channels that you would think would be that a lot of my peers are doing. So a lot of my peers are doing like weekly webinars where they're getting their customers comfortable with these places before they travel. Like, for example, like if you wanted to climb Mount Kilimanjaro or climb the Inca or go on the Inca Trail to Peru, they would have a webinar where they'd bring 100 people, 100 clients on, and the CEO or guide would speak about it. And I just, for me, for some reason, I wasn't looking at that channel and some other channels, and it's something that made me reflect on maybe why I wasn't doing it. And I'll be honest with you, there's some things that I'm very comfortable with doing, and there's some things that I do have unfamiliarity around or even some fear around. So I've been working on addressing that. And what came out of that process is we started 2 things. We started something called Campfire Adventures, it's free, but every single week we have a Zoom call with 8 people who sign up from around the world, and we bring an adventure guide, and we give an hour and an opportunity for people to talk about their favorite adventure and to talk about maybe also a challenge they're going through in life. We don't record it, but it gives people an opportunity to connect in a time that a lot of people feel very isolated. So what I'm using this as a way is to give people an opportunity to have that same level of connection that they do on our trips, that we can do it in a small group virtually. Separately, and I join every one of those calls, and we have, I think the next 8 are already booked. And then separately, we're starting, next week's our first one, but a series of weekly webinars where we're going to be traveling around the planet and talking about our different trips. So it's and it's a long answer, but in short, it's really challenged me to think about the things that I wasn't doing, where my fears and limitations were. And I'm very confident and hopeful for the future that we're going to emerge stronger out of this.
Thank you. That's a great answer. I think that's something we can all be doing, regardless of industry or small business, large business. I'm going to skip down to a question because it's somewhat related to the COVID situation. Does the current COVID situation make for a great time to start a business, or is it wise to hold off and see how the pandemic changes certain industries, as some will likely not be the same even after a vaccine is developed?
Okay, so I don't know if I'm the best person to answer this question, but I'm a believer that that there's always an opportunity and that anything's possible. So I spend a lot of time thinking about like my beliefs personally. And if I'm going to go into a situation thinking that it might not work, then what's going to happen is I'm going to take actions based on those beliefs that will make my company not work. If I'm going to go into, like, for example, for my company now, there's a lot of people who are even closing up travel companies. But for me, the way I'm looking at this is that we're going to thrive out of this crisis, right? So by me having those beliefs, I'm going to take actions like putting these new marketing tactics, like reaching out to clients and putting new trips together that will position us for the future, and we will thrive after it. So I think the first is, think about, I'm a big believer that if you believe it will happen, you can find a way to make it happen, whatever you're doing in life. In terms of like what type of business to think about, I go back to, I go back to kind of what we talked about in the first step, is to find an idea that really resonates with you. If I've noticed there's a lot of people who are like, well, I want to come up with this like really crafty idea that maybe solves some type of industry issue or business issue, but they're coming at it from here, like from their head, rather than from their heart. And if you're doing something from your head, you're not going to have much staying power. You're not going to have the fight to last it through. It is so challenging to start a new business, especially in difficult times, that unless it's something that truly resonates with what you're good at and what you love and that fulfills you, you're going to struggle with it. So I think, again, in short, if you have something that you're thinking about, you have a lot of free time on your hands probably at the moment. So why not start the process now? It takes about a year anyway to get everything up and running, and then you'll be ready to launch out of this. And believe in yourself. If you believe it's possible, that then it is possible.
That's awesome. All right. Carl asks, how do you conduct market research on a limited budget?
Okay, that's a good question. There's a lot of ways. One way that we do it is, I have like my personal Instagram, but we also have a business Instagram, and Facebook and social media pages. But you can do you can do posts where you're posing questions to your audiences. You can in Instagram and Facebook, you can do stories where you're asking, you're doing surveys on those stories. Something that we've done recently is when would you travel again, to our customers, right? So we put, would you travel in the next 3 months, the next 6 months, the next 9 months? And it gives us a sense of that as well. Also, what would need to be put in place for you to travel again? And we put, different things on there as well. So we use Instagram. We also use SurveyMonkey, which doesn't cost very much. It might be $5 or $10 a month, where you could do surveys to, again, friends or family, or maybe you have an audience, and that is very limited as well. Separately, also MailChimp. So MailChimp is an email marketing service where we use for all of our mailing lists, not only for my personal consulting work, but also for my business. And we send surveys out via MailChimp as well. I have a kind of a belief on marketing. I believe that any marketing that costs a lot of money will not work. If you see, if you meet a coach who wants you to spend tens of thousands of dollars to do their services, or we don't do any advertising. I think it's like throwing money out. I think it's like throwing money out the door. I think what works is you using what you have at this moment, and you continue to keep showing up each and every day. And the more that people see you, whether you're doing something like I'm doing now, or whether you're continuing to post on social media or continuing to reach out to potential, the more that you show up in life day in and day out, the more success you will have. And that doesn't cost much to show up. It's just your energy.
Thank you. All right. Tom asks, any suggestions on finding or creating mastermind groups?
Yeah. Well, I'll give you an example so I created one during COVID, and I'll just give you an example. So I was invited with a group of 7 other travel industry CEOs to El Salvador by American Airlines United Airlines in November to see El Salvador. And I met these 7 other people, and we all clicked. We spent like 6 days together. And, we have a WhatsApp group where we've been communicating since, and then COVID happens. And obviously we're all thinking like, oh my God, the world is crashing. And we all needed support. So I just sent a note to them. I said, hey everyone, do you want to start a weekly call to just talk about some of these issues and to see how we can move forward? And a lot of the people on this call were much more, have been in the travel industry much longer than me. And I definitely felt a little anxiety around it, and would they actually want to do this? But they all jumped into it. And it's now it started out as a weekly call discussing global COVID issues, to now it evolved into a mastermind, where at the beginning of the call, each of us talk about an issue that we're having with our company. And it's been so valuable to me to do this. We have a team that works in my company, but I still feel like a solo entrepreneur because I don't have a partner. So it helps me to have that support on a weekly basis. And for you, I think it was Tom, I'm sure you have a lot of friends who are business owners, and they don't necessarily have to be in the same industry as you, but maybe even starting with like 3 or 4 friends, and starting out on WhatsApp or text, and starting to share your weekly views, and then start a call every week. And I'd say, listen, you might not have any idea where it goes, right? But you don't need to. Just start and be open and let it evolve naturally. This is gonna sound, a lot of times I don't know what I'm doing. And I'm scared a lot and I'm okay with saying that, but I have fears about different things that I'm doing, whether it's climbing a mountain or starting a new project or giving a speech. But the thing is, I recognize, and it doesn't stop me from moving forward. So don't let fear or the unknown stop you, and don't think you need to know 7 or 8 steps ahead of you. Just take one step, and what happens usually is the next step then reveals itself.
That's great. All right. And this is a somewhat related question, Jeff, you can probably say it. In your opinion, what's the best way to find someone to help mentor you? So it looks like he's asking a little bit more about the trade groups and how open those folks are to becoming mentors and lending advice.
Yeah. So okay, good question. And I'll go to the next slide. But there's a few things to do that. So you can pay someone, and there's obviously through trade groups you could probably find consultants, which I did originally. But I don't have any, I don't work with necessarily adventure travel consultants now. because now I'm fortunate enough to be in the industry now where I know enough people where we kind of help each other out, right? But if you're new to an industry, on this page, you'll see there's two great resources. The first is the New Jersey Small Business Development Center at the College of New Jersey, which is government funded, where you can actually get free consulting. And then also SCORE. So go to score.org, which is a network of thousands of business mentors who were very successful in their businesses. That this is all over the country, right? So there's one, whether you're in North Jersey or Pennsylvania or even in the Princeton area, there are tons of people who are looking to help other people just because they want to give back, and it's also free. So those are two resources. Again, in the industry, or if you're going through one of your trade associations, you might, again, it could be beneficial for you to pay to work with someone, but yeah, you might have to pay as for a consultant.
All right, excellent. And I do have one more question that came through privately. How do you know when you have enough capital? How much is enough? And I'm sure that may vary by industry.
Well, okay, so I'm going to kind of expand on this a little bit, but there's a lot, in the last 10 or 15 years, there's been a shift where people are trying to get rich quick, right? So you see a lot of young people, they graduate college, they want to get like venture capital funding or private equity funding, and they want to hit it quick. If that's your goal, I mean, anything that I talk about probably can't help you, because the way I look at everything is from a long-term view, going step by step, and to use as limited capital as possible. Now, that said, I was very, very fortunate to have a job where I was able to use part of my salary to help fund my business. But I did not want a partner. I did not want any other owners, and I did not want any debt. So I said to myself that I will take a 6 or 7 year view on this. I'll keep my job, and I will build my company while on the side while I'm in banking, right? And then once it feels secure enough where I have enough clients to support myself, then I will leave the banking industry. And it took me 6.5 years of working nights and weekends. But what came out of that is I have no debt, I had no partners, and I was able to spread the amount of capital I needed over a long period of time. I would say another thing on that is, let's say I quit day one and I had, I don't know, let's say I had a certain amount of money in the bank to fund me for a few years. I don't think the success of my company would have been any quicker. It just takes 5 or 6 years to build a business, whether you quit or whether you're doing it on the side. So I'm a big proponent on building something slowly and steadily on the side, because listen, if you quit your job and you have a family and you have all these bills and expenses, I mean, you're entering into a pretty chaotic situation, potentially chaotic situation where not everyone's going to be happy with you. So, you know, for me, I wanted it to disrupt my personal life as much as, I wanted it to not disrupt my personal life as, you know, as little as possible, and to really take my time. I think that I wouldn't have had that perspective if I had not done the first company out of college, because I had done the reverse, right? I was getting funded. I was doing this all day, and then I was teaching tennis and working weekends at nights and weekends. So I flipped it essentially. And yeah, so I tell people, just take your time. So you don't need that much capital if you're not in a rush. So yeah.
Well, thank you very much. And I don't think we have any more questions, which is perfect because we are right at 1:30. And again, I'll say it again, I think you gave us some really great insight. There were some great questions. I think even just your personal outlook is super helpful, especially in the time that we're in, to have an optimistic outlook and some really keen advice for people that may be considering going a different direction. I think it was great, and people have a lot to take from it.
Great, thank you. Thank you for having me on. And then I mentioned most of the items on the resources page, but there's some articles that I sent over in the chat if you want to read, one that I wrote and one that was about my journey. There's 2 links here for people who who want some free consulting. And then if you're looking for additional resources, you can check out my site at jeffbonaldi.com. We have some additional articles and resources that are free for anyone. And you know what? Good luck. And yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity out of this for the people who actually, again, for the people who actually go for it and believe there is.
Right. Thank you so much. I will just add, I copy and pasted those links in the chat, so it's probably under my my name, but you guys can all take those links and take what you will from those articles. Jeff, thank you so much. Thanks for being with us and taking the time. We appreciate it. Everyone stay safe.